Hey everyone, this is Michelle Dibley. I'm the program director here at Washington National Cathedral. We have a very full house here, and we are working to connect to Facebook so that the folks who aren't able to join us on Zoom can see us there. So give us just a minute or two to get started. We're gonna go ahead and try again there. In the meantime, I'll just chat at you all for a moment. So I'm here tonight, as you know, with Pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber. We will spend a little bit of time at the beginning talking with one another about resurrection and what that means, and hope to dive a little bit past Easter hats and the Easter services into what resurrection looks like in our lived reality. So we'll spend some time doing that. We'll open it up closer to probably 8:30 for some questions from you all. The way that we'll use questions tonight is through the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. So if you're with us in Zoom here, then if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you'll either see three dots where it says more, or you'll see a button that says Q&A. It looks like a quote box. Go ahead and click on that. It'll pop open a box where you can ask your question, and that's where we'll be drawing some of your questions from tonight. So if you have questions about that right now, feel free to drop them in the Zoom webinar chat. If you need to know how to make that work, it's the same deal. There's a button on the bottom that says chat. You can click that, and it should open up a box where you can type a question to all of the panelists, to everyone who's an attendee, and if you're having questions about how to get the Q&A box open, then we can do that. So somebody just asked if we're only getting audio. Yes, that is correct right now. You'll have video in just a few minutes as we get ready to connect to Facebook. So yeah, Margaret, I'm seeing your note about starting to load. Now let's go ahead and start late on Facebook. And Hannah, can we let Hannah know that we're getting late started on Facebook so she can post there and let people know that they can hang out for a few minutes? And then the whole thing will be available on YouTube after tonight. So Hannah, super, thank you. I see your note there. All right, so I think, Margaret, when you are ready, here we go. All right, friends. Nadia, I don't see you yet.
Oh, hold on. Hi.
Hey, there you are. Fantastic. Welcome to Washington National Cathedral, such as it is in the upstairs of my house.
I've always dreamed of seeing this building. It's so beautiful.
So we're so glad that you're here with us tonight. I'm going to run just quickly through a welcome to everyone here on behalf of Dean Hollerith and the staff and the community of Washington National Cathedral. This is one of our honest to God conversations in which we invite one or more people to talk about God and honesty. And often those are folks of faith who are wrestling with the world as it is, because we all are. So we have a chance to talk with Pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber about that tonight. So we're so grateful that you're here. I'm going to start us off with a prayer. I'll run through the agenda, and then I'll do a longer, fuller introduction of our guests, and then we'll jump in. Okay? So I have two prayers. One of them is from the New Zealand prayer book, Won't You Pray With Me, called Prayer for People Facing Great Uncertainty. God of the present moment, God who in Jesus stills the storm and soothes the frantic heart, bring hope and courage to all who wait or work in uncertainty. Bring hope that you will make them the equal of whatever lies ahead. Bring them courage to endure what cannot be avoided. For your will is health and wholeness. You are God, and we need you. Amen. And we also pray tonight that God's presence will be here, that the words that we share will touch the hearts that need to be touched, that your grace will be present, and that as we listen and seek resurrection in our times, that you may reveal to us the things that we cannot see on our own. In your name we pray. Amen. Great. So for those of you who do not know Pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber, Pastor Nadia is an ordained Lutheran pastor, founder of House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver, Colorado, and a extensive writer, 3 best-selling books, beginning with Pastrix and continuing with Accidental Saints. I love the subtitle of this one, Finding God in All the Wrong People, and Shameless, a Sexual Reformation. And also the newly launched podcast, The Confessional, which we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about tonight. So before we dive deeply in, I want to read a piece from Pastrix that is your take on resurrection, because we're in Easter season and I want to talk about resurrection, but the resurrection that I want to talk about doesn't have to do with fabulous hats and Easter dinner. And many of us had lots of questions about what Easter was going to look like this year, given that we are not gathering in our own spaces. And when I was preparing for this, I found this piece and it felt really relevant. And I'm guessing you know which one I'm going to read, because it's probably the one that everybody reads. But this is from Pastrix. My experience is that the God of Easter is a God with dirt under his nails. Resurrection never feels like being made clean and nice and pious like in those Easter pictures. I would never have agreed to work for God if I had believed God was interested in trying to make me nice or even good. Instead, what I knew even back then was that God was never about making me spiffy. God was about making me new. New doesn't always look perfect, like the Easter story itself. New is often messy. New looks like recovering alcoholics. New looks like reconciliation between family members who don't actually deserve it. New looks like every time I manage to admit I was wrong, and every time I manage to not mention when I'm right. New looks like every fresh start and every act of forgiveness and every moment of letting go of what we thought we couldn't live without, and then somehow living with it anyway. New is the thing we never saw coming, never even hoped for, but ends up being what we needed all along. So thank you for those words. And I want to talk for a little bit about the podcast, but I want to see if there's anything you want to say about that kind of resurrection in the space that we're in right now and what it means.
It just feels disorienting to be in Easter season when it feels like Good Friday still all around us, to be honest. I mean, I know in terms of our calendar and how we do things, that's where we're at, but it's so weird to be there but not feel like we're there, you know?
Yeah.
So just to start out by being honest about that, I think. I think like, I guess I see resurrection as like the reset button that's just always available to us, and that and it literally is always available to us. I think it might be why I'm so obsessed with forgiveness and repentance and redemption and all of those themes. It's not because it's because I'm desperate for them. The reason I believe in second, third, fourth chances is because I'm just a second, third, fourth chance needer. And so I always only sort of write about and preach the things I need to hear or that I need to be reassured of. So I guess in Easter, the thing that keeps ringing through my ears, as it does, I think a lot of us, is that Emmaus story. And those 3 words that were just so like grief-soaked and devastated when the disciples said, you know, are you the only one to not know what's happened in Jerusalem? And when they said, we had hoped, like, I can't read those words or hear them without feeling them, because that's kind of such a human reality that like there's so many things that like we had hoped, you know. We had hoped that our kid could finish their school year. We had hoped that we got to go on the vacation we've saved for 1.5 years for. We had hoped that the people in our life wouldn't die so fucking soon, you know, from COVID-19. Like we had hoped that, that, you know, we could put a down payment on a first house. You know, I mean, there's so many things that we are in this Emmaus road about right now that we had hoped. And I think just being really honest about those and not trying to be, have that sort of malignant cheerfulness. But to be honest about, yeah, there's all of these things like this grief that we're all experiencing is taking up so much of our bandwidth, and it's real. And then this is where it comes, it's not going to be the most real thing, you know, like there will be, and yet. So there will be that, you know, that maybe what we consider what life looks like for us to consider it, everything being okay, might be shifting. You know, the thing that we considered like, hey, everything's okay because we have this economic security, we have this certainty, we have these plans we know are going to happen, all of this stuff that we had. And because we have all these things, that means everything's okay. I believe everything's going to be okay, but it doesn't mean it's going to be what we had in the basket before. Like what it means for things to be okay is going to maybe radically shift. And yet we can, like, human beings are resilient, you know? And so I guess if I think of like some kind of hopefulness or resurrection, it's that we can have the ability for things to be okay, even though they look like what was not okay 6 months ago. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I guess that's sort of what I've been thinking about resurrection. And we cannot trust in when things go back to how they were, then it will be okay. If we do that, we're doomed, because there were so many things about that really were not okay, you know?
Well, I've been thinking about the question about resurrection is something has to end for resurrection to happen. Something has to go away. And sometimes something that we really loved and cherished dies, and it shouldn't have. And resurrection comes afterwards because it has to, because we have to look towards that. And sometimes the thing that dies is the thing that should have died a long time ago.
For sure.
And it just didn't happen until whatever moment, right? And so I'm feeling like there's this mixed sense where a lot of people are losing a lot of things right now that we shouldn't be losing, right?
Yeah, right.
But there's also a lot of stuff that's broken that might actually resurrect into something that is nothing we could have imagined without this pause that's happening here.
Well, also, I mean, sometimes the new thing that God is doing can come out of the death of something God was doing in the past. Do you know what I'm saying? Like to say, hey, this thing in the past was beautiful, it was redemptive, we love it, we clung to it, it gave us comfort. All of those things can be true. And sometimes the new thing God's doing comes out of the rubble of the thing God was doing in the past. So sometimes we want to cling to it going, therefore we have to keep it.
Yeah.
And that's not always the best move, really. No.
Clinging to something that we want to keep.
Clinging to something because it was good in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that you have been doing recently is creating this podcast.
Yeah.
And it feels to me like this is shifting the conversation to the folks who you've talked with in that podcast who have done a lot of letting go of things in the past, some of which may have been things God was working on and some of which most definitely weren't in some ways, right? So if you would just tell us a little bit about the name of the podcast, The Confessional, right? Like where does that come from? What are you hoping to do with it? And a little bit about the first couple of people you talked to. We love it.
Well, yeah, so the thing with The Confessional is really just me going, asking myself a couple questions. One, what are the pastoral needs of people who are not in religious communities? Because just because we live in an increasingly secular age, and just because we had the Enlightenment, doesn't mean the needs that religion has always met in human beings evaporated. A lot of those needs are still there. And so I have an interest in what are those needs and how can they be met? And I'm part of two communities that practice some form of confession and absolution, the Lutheran Church and 12-step communities. So, and I see the power of it and the need for that to have that sort of cleansing of going, here's this heavy thing I'm carrying. I have so much shame for this thing and it keeps haunting me. And to sort of have that metabolized in a spiritually healthy way by bringing it out into the light, that sunlight's the great disinfectant. So I don't think we should have quite so much, this is controversial, I don't think we should have quite so much shame about sin. And what I mean by that is that like nobody's going to avoid making mistakes. Like it's what we do with them. It's like I said, how they're metabolized and how they create the rest of our story that is much more interesting to me. And yet so many people carry around such a heavy burden about things they're so ashamed of. And so the first question was what need can be met pastorally, but also sort of like what needs are there? And then the second one is how can I be a pastoral voice and a pastoral presence as a public figure? So, the confessional is really people come on and they tell me a story from their life about their worst moment, the worst thing they did, the thing that weighs them down, that they feel so much shame and guilt around. And then we have a conversation like, what story were you telling yourself at the time that led you to do this that now isn't even true? Or, like trying to unpack some of it. And then also, how are you a different person now than the person who did this? Like, how did having done this change your life in ways that actually ended up being really reductive? And then, so we have that chat and I just show as much curiosity and compassion as I can. And then later I go away and I write a blessing for them that I record at the end. So I write a benediction that's for them. So rather than like confession and absolution, it's more like admission and benediction. And then at the end, there's a call-in segment. We have a call line and people leave messages for a segment called Shit I'm Not Proud Of. So that's like little things that are like embarrassing, like I never actually watched Game of Thrones. I just like would read the synopsis every Monday so I could pretend I did, stuff like that. So people don't have to feel so alone in their little embarrassing secrets.
No, but I love that section. And so I've listened to both of the podcasts. They're both great. And the people, and I want you to talk for a second about the people, but both of them are very public about their stories, right? Yes. So their conversation with you is not the first place where they've talked about them. But the confessional, when people are calling in, that might be the first time that they ever said that thing. And so for me, it's this connection between some people are, and all of us, I think, are called to do this to some extent, are called to share the things that made us who we are. In some cases, those are things that we're not proud of, right? If you got to actually know me, you got to know those things.
That's exactly right.
Some people put that in books, and some of us are terrified to say it to the person that we actually want to be friends with, but we're not quite sure what's going to happen if we say this thing.
Yeah.
To the person that's not our friend yet. So I love the inclusion of that at the end, because it makes it more like, oh, this is me. This isn't just those people who wrote books. This is all of us.
Yeah. I love that little segment at the end too. Yeah.
So tell us about Megan and Lenny.
Yeah. So my first guest was Megan Phelps-Roper, and she grew up in Westboro Baptist Church. Fred Phelps is her grandfather. So she had a God Hates Fag sign put in her hand by the time she was 5. And so, and as her story unfolds, you realize the thing that helped her break out of it, because it is a closed system, because it's all her family in that church. And it's so intense, the ideology, as you can imagine. It's all she knew. And when Twitter came around, she was tasked with broadcasting Westboro's message on Twitter. And so the thing that broke her out of it was literally there were people on Twitter who showed curiosity and compassion towards her. There were all the people who were like, Westboro's horrible. Hey, we all agree Westboro's horrible, and the fact that they protest funerals and all that, everyone agrees that's bad, right? but it was not the people trying to shame her or call her out or, you know, aggressively build their own brand of righteousness by saying how bad they are or whatever. And it was people who showed her curiosity and kindness and compassion that changed her enough for her to end up leaving that church. So she's so beautiful. And the other, my second guest, the one that came out yesterday, is Lenny Duncan, who is also a recovering alcoholic addict, heavily tattooed, foul-mouthed Lutheran pastor.
It's a fairly small club, right?
There's not a ton, there's only a few of us. But anyway, it's his story about missing 13 years of his daughter's life. And how that unfolded was just so unexpected and beautiful by the end. So I just believe in what comes out of the hard stuff. I just believe in it. Like, it's okay, let's talk about the really horrible, shameful stuff, because I promise you, it's like your superhero origin story, you know? That's
a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So what was the most touching thing for you about getting to do those podcasts? Right? I mean, you do a lot of public speaking. You talk to a lot of folks. So,
but it's hard for me on the road. I'm not an extrovert, and so even though I'm in front of a lot of people, I don't engage a lot one-on-one with people. It's hard. So for me, the most touching thing was writing the blessings for them, because here's back to my question about where do the needs that religion has always filled in human beings. Every culture, every time throughout history, religion is part of it in one way or another. One of the needs that religion has met, that yet I'm like, where do we get it, is where do you receive a blessing? Where are you going to receive a blessing? What do people substitute for that? Getting likes on social media? Is that the closest we have? Like, I mean, desperately, people need to receive a blessing. And so to be able to write those and also just knowing, when I've been on the road the last several years, I end with these long benedictions that I write. And that's the thing people remember. They don't have any idea what I said on stage. They're crying because they received a blessing at the end, you know? So I loved writing those. Also, it's kind of fulfilled my longing to be preaching more. So I think it's kind of filled that need for me right now. I mean, before the shutdown happened, I was preaching locally like once a month, because really I only do one thing well. I've just been clever enough to parlay that into books and talks and podcasts, but preaching is the only thing I've ever really done well. So I was
well, we're really grateful that you do it well.
Like, can I make it into t-shirts? What else can I do with it? But anyway, so I've been preaching locally, either at the women's prison or at the Cathedral. Those are my two main my main places to preach here. So I miss it. Yeah.
That brings to mind a question that has come up in a couple of places, both ahead of time and then also in the chat box tonight, about the more traditional church, right? So religion has a role. Your work in the church has been mostly with people who don't typically come to church, right? Like your podcast is intended to reach folks. So
I've been called to preach to the Gentiles, yes.
Somebody's got to do it, right? And the Gentiles probably need it more than the rest of us who sit in, the pews every Sunday. But so the two questions are, one is, in these moments, a lot of people are finding their way either back to church or finding their way looking for a new kind of church if church has not been a good place for them in the past, right? Harmful theologies so people are coming back to a church that's mostly, so the Cathedral is the biggest version of it, right? And so one question that came up is, what advice or guidance do you have for people who are finding their way back? And then the flip side of that is, what's the word to people who are in the church already, right? Like, what's our role in this moment as this is happening?
Yeah, I mean, to those who are searching, I would say, have some grace. Like, you're not going to step into the place that is every single thing is perfect. The music is what you need. The people are who you're comfortable with. The preaching is spot on. To have a little grace, like nobody's going to custom make a church for you. But to kind of decide what is the most important, is it the preaching? Is it the music? It's okay to have some preferences, but no church is going to meet all of them. And so I think people sometimes come in and they go, well, I like these things, but that thing isn't like to my preference, and then they leave. And it's consumerism run amok in religion. So I think that would be my word to the wise. Also, maybe don't go alone, go with a friend. Honestly, if it's hard, go with a friend. Buddy system is great when you're church shopping. And then to the churches, I would say there's a huge difference, and I think the church doesn't discern this well all the time. There's a huge difference between being friendly and being welcoming. And I think the church confuses them, and they think because they're friendly that they're welcoming, and they're not. And so to have a practice of going, how does this feel to a first-time person walking in not knowing anything about worship, right? For instance, that will make you more welcoming if you can honestly ask that about everything. The person giving announcements, would somebody who's never been here have any idea what they're talking about? Or is it just talking in code to them? The order of worship. The first time I went to a liturgical church, I was so lost. There were 2 hymnals, and then there was the order of service, and then there was an insert. And so in the order of service, there was code that said like some word I'd never heard of, Kyrie, and then like LBW26. And now I'm looking at the hymnals and going, well, that says evangelical. Okay, so I pull that up, but I don't know that the liturgy is in the front of the book and there's smaller numbers at the bottom. So I'm looking through the hymns that are bigger numbers at the top, right? So then, I mean, it's like on and on and on and on. Yeah. You have to know all this code. And so I was completely lost. And so what that felt like was, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong. Everyone else here who has it memorized, who's not even looking at all the different weird papers, they belong. So even things like that, or even from, everyone's different, but for me, I know people are like, they put lyrics on the screen for songs that everybody around them knows the notes to. And I'm like, I don't have a fighting chance to sing because I've not heard this song. And I'm not musically literate, but I know that if the note goes up, you sing up a little bit, right? I mean, like, it's not. So even just, they're like, well, people don't read music, but even I have a fighting chance of singing a song. I don't know if I can see where the notes move. So they're just little things like that. There's a million of them. Right. And so the benefit at House for All Sinners and Saints, the church I founded, is we got to start from scratch. And we got to be very intentional about every single thing we did as much as possible. There was a reason that we did every single thing. And a lot of times churches just default to practices, and there's not, maybe there used to be a reason, but people 2 generations ago came up with it and they're dead, So I think
the world is a really different place than it was 2 generations ago. Right? We have different tools. We have different access.
Also, everything we do belays a value. It shows people what we value. And so if I think churches should be willing to be as honest, as rigorously honest around why do you do certain things, rigorously honest. So if you have ugly fake flowers on the altar, and it's because Agnes puts them there, and everybody knows that Agnes, in this super codependent way, does about 70% of the volunteer work. And so the value everybody shares is keeping Agnes happy in a really like codependent way. And she puts them there. And so everyone hates the flowers, but we have to keep Agnes happy or else we'll have to do more volunteer work. Things like that are all over churches. All I'm saying is first of all, you're okay. You're not alone. Like most churches have that kind of shit. I'm just saying, say it out loud in front of other people. And if everyone goes, yes, that's true, and we're okay with it, fine. But if you speak the truth out loud and people cringe, now you have a fighting chance of changing.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me too, thank you for both of those answers and the breadth of it. That in the moment where people are accessing church online, right? We're not walking into a church and seeing the fake flowers on the altar. because we have this little box, if we're going to church at all, we're looking at a screen, right? And so some of the pastors and the people who do worship and liturgy that I know are actually using the moment to try to figure out, if there are new people coming to our church, how do we make that as accessible as possible? How do we actually think about this moment so that when this moment lifts, when we can gather, when people can actually show up in person to a place they've never been before to check it out for the preaching or the music or whatever, that this little window of time might create some opportunity for people to church hop a little more easily than we can. I mean, how many church services can you watch on Sunday? If you're church hopping, you can watch a lot more than if you're just going to different places.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So one more question about the church, and then I want to sort of shift us back into some individual stuff. So this is a question about the revolution that's occurring in Christianity right now. So we've got a question about Phyllis. Two of these kind of go together. So Phyllis Tickle said the great emergence was going to happen. And I think she thought we were due for a garage sale on the institutional church, right? So turning the tables over, figuring out what are we getting rid of as a new church emerges. And this other question is, what role do you think the National Cathedral particularly should or could play better in the revolution that is occurring in Christianity right now? So the sense that something is shifting in Christianity. Broadly, what are some of the things we might want to let go of? And then what might the cathedral or other congregations around the country do to help facilitate that emergence of something new?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for two, because I just don't know enough about the National Cathedral to comment.
Yeah.
So that would feel insincere, but in terms of my dear Phyllis's thing about the rummage sale, I think we'll know more the answer to that question in a year. I mean, somebody said to me, I think maybe 2 years, no, it was during the 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. They said, what does the church of the future look like? And I said, decluttered. That's what I think. It looks decluttered. Because I know there's so much angst. Mainline Christianity, as it has existed for a while, is not it's not doing well, right? That's not news to a lot of us, right? So if you look at the spreadsheets and the budgets and how are our camps and colleges doing, and how the seminaries, and can we keep them all open, and the properties and the committees and all of that, right? Like that's declining. And if you look at the average age of mainline Protestant church attenders, if you project them out 15 years, most of them aren't around anymore. Not to be an,
demographically a fact.
to find a point on it. Okay, so here's what I guess I wonder about all of it, is that I think that budgets and camps and colleges and committees and property committee and all that stuff. I guess I wonder if the church hasn't bought into a set of values it wasn't intended to buy into to begin with. Because I think all of those things are certainly signs of a kingdom. I'm not certain that they are signs of the kingdom. And so as painful as they might be to let go of, as much as we might not have the camps and colleges and the budgets and committees and the properties and all of that, I have no anxiety about the church's welfare. I have zero. I have absolutely none, to be honest, because I know that the power of the resurrection, the power of the gospel does something to the people who are captured by it. And that no matter what happens to all the other stuff, if it all goes away, I know for a fact that people will still gather in maybe small groups, maybe in parking garages, who the hell knows, and they will gather in the name of the triune God, and they will tell the story about the night Jesus was betrayed by his faltering friends, and they'll break bread and share wine, and they'll give it to their friends, and they'll say it's the body and blood of Christ, it's for forgiveness of sins, and it's for you. And they will do that forever, just like they've done since the first night it ever was done, right? It will keep happening. And so because the fact is that that's what the church is to me. I have no anxiety about the future of the church. It will keep happening. It will defiantly still emerge in every time and place, I think, until the world is gone. I mean, I just believe the story is that it captures people that much. And it's become about, arguing about the color of the carpet in the narthex. I'm unconcerned.
Well, and that circles us back to the notion that God at one time and one place was doing something really important with the church, right? That the church did some really important work. If you look at the civil rights movement, if you look at the church movement, that's the institutional church, then much good has come alongside the things that are not necessarily connected deeply to that goodness and the reason for which it was good in the first place. Right?
Yeah, I think that's well put. Yeah.
So this resurrection that we're trying to live into in the midst of this space between what it actually might look like for the church to reinvent itself, which is already happening, right? It's not going to happen in one place at one time. It's already happening. The resurrection and the good news are continuing.
I will be honest, though, there is something that does concern me about the change, and that is that maybe it's just so snotty, but I think graduate level theological education of the clergy is really important. I do. I think there's something robust about that. There's something that makes it about the thing it's supposed to be about, rather than about the charisma of the person totally, and it roots us in this beautiful way that can be humbling, but also comforting in a way that snazziness can't. So I don't want to lose, graduate theological education of the clergy. I think it's important. I mean, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "Oh my God, be wary of leaders who are just all charisma. It's dangerous."
Yeah.
So.
It's making me. I lived at a seminary for 2 out of 3 years, and so saw a lot of graduate education and really hear, and the clergy that I know who take seriously their spirituality alongside the academic and pastoral work are some of the best clergy that I know, right? Yeah. Having been sort of created in that space with their peers. It was a residential school, so it was mostly a residential experience, which isn't everyone's experience. And there is something to the depth of what happens when you live that and allow God to remake you in a particular community. Yeah. And I wonder how we extend that opportunity in these, right? Like, how does the church continue to invest in that kind of leadership, that kind of depth, that kind of spirit?
Right.
When graduate education is expensive to produce, and it's expensive to join, and for mid-career clergy, it's it's so yes to everything you're saying, and a challenge to those of us who love the church and want significant, creative, deep, spiritual, theologically grounded leaders. We gotta figure some of that out. So,
I agree. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So we're coming up on 8:40. So we want to wrap in probably the next 5 to 10 minutes. Here's one of the questions we were hoping. So, Margaret, do we have the ability to bring Tanya up to ask her question? We were going to try to do this. And here comes Tanya. Great. So Tanya had a great question that reflected the questions that some other folks have asked about grace. And so Tanya, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for taking my question, Nadia. I see a lot of people whom I admire, who I know to be smart and good, easily hurl insults at those who believe and act differently than we may like. And to be honest, I fall into this trap at times too. And I find it even more so now that our virtual world is our primary way of connecting, that there's these freewheeling comments of disgust and contempt and hatred just filling my newsfeed. And a recent example is just after President Trump hinted at the idea of ingesting disinfectant, that there's all these memes that his supporters follow that ill-gotten advice and ingest cleaning solution, which would injure or kill them. So my question is, how do we choose something more productive than this insidious righteousness when our very health individually and collectively is on the line? And what are those first steps we could take to interrupt this toxic cycle of accusation and othering that easily occurs online?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks, Tanya. I have been on the sort of unfortunate side of it in both ways. Oh, can she stay up so I can see her while I'm answering? Is it possible? Sorry.
Yeah, we can do that. Margaret can.
Anyway, I'll keep going. What I mean by that is that I was the subject of a fake news story last year, and I won't go into all of it. It would take a minute, but what I saw happen was that somebody from a conservative news source took one line out of an entire hour-long interview out of context, and then crafted a headline based on it, right? That they knew would stoke the righteous outrage of conservatives. It was a headline that was just pure clickbait. It was everything that's wrong with with liberals, right? And it was very particularly crafted. And what I saw was this conservative news outlet, their followers came on my site and wrote a bunch of really hateful, horrible things to me. But then other sites started writing stories based on their story. And so now it's expanded. And now people who are even just my readers, people who follow me on social media, are leaving comments. I like your teaching, but I was so disappointed about to hear this thing, And so I just watched it grow and grow and grow and grow. And then I thought, oh my gosh, how many times have I clicked on a headline that was cynically crafted to stoke my liberal moral outrage, knowing it would do that and that I would click. And you know why? Every time you click, that outlet gets money. They get advertising money. End of conversation. That's the whole game now. So when we have to become really a lot more astute about how we're being manipulated so those people can make money off of us. People are making money off of our ridiculous clickbait outrage. So I had to look at, for myself, why am I so quick to believe all of these horrible things about this other group? I mean, I don't even question the source. I don't care if it's legit. I don't even ask, did this thing really happen? And so ever since I've been on the other side of it, I've started trying to only click on something if it's a reputable news source that I know I can trust. If it's something I've never heard of before, I don't click on it because I'm being manipulated so people can make money. And sometimes it's foreign actors, as we know, who are doing this to try to divide us. So for me, I'm trying to look as deeply as I can in myself to go, what need is it filling in me to feel this kind of hatred towards this other person? Am I being manipulated? Is this just a way to make money off of my own sinful impulses? So I guess I look at, I also try to look at, does my outrage about another person's action or the story I'm being told about another person, does the outrage in some way serve as a smokescreen for the problem that I now am glad I don't have to look at? Meaning, do they get to be a scapegoat? People will be like, we just hate Trump supporters. I'm like, no, you don't. You love them. They get to carry all of our xenophobia for us because maybe they're 60% xenophobic and we're only 57% xenophobic. So thank God they're worse than us because they get to just carry all of it, So I try to look at that stuff for the sake of my own soul as much as I can. And it only works a little bit. So That's my sage advice. That's all I have. Good luck.
Well, good luck to all of us, right? For not reacting to those things. So I have a related question. So Tanya, I'm going to piggyback on yours and
Thanks,
Nadia,
Tanya.
this one here. So I love that this person asked where we turn in the Bible for guidance for this, and not what guidance does our speaker have for this, because it's a really hard question. So where can we turn in the Bible for guidance or strength to continue to see our national leaders with the eyes of compassion and curiosity? Where can we turn in the Bible to see our leaders? And I would expand that not just to our national leaders, but to our, our fellow people.
I think the sort of ye who are without sin cast the first stone is a helpful place for me, like I was saying before, to do my own sort of inventory around this stuff. If there's something I hate so much in someone else, I have to look a little bit to where's that coming from, and usually it's something I despise in myself as well. So I think being as deeply honest as I can about that allows me to have a little compassion. But I also feel like there is a powers and principalities element to what we're dealing with right now. It can feel so evil and so heavy that sometimes the faithful thing to do is to figure out what is a magnificent and righteous defiance look like. And defiance can come in the form of going, I'm not going to participate in this thing I'm being clickbaited into. But I think of Shifra and Pua, the Hebrew midwives who used Pharaoh's own xenophobia against him when they were asked, hey, why didn't you kill all the male Hebrew babies? I'm like, well, first of all, have you met a midwife? But also, but they said, oh, they played into the xenophobia. Hey, well, by the time we get there, they're so robust, those Hebrew women, that they're already done. So we couldn't do anything, right? But they knew the right thing to do. And I think there comes a time when we have to know the right thing to do. And sometimes that might look like a kind of defiance that's a little scary. And yet, are we called to that in this moment? We might be, we might be, I don't know. I struggle with that. Yeah.
Can you say, I was preparing for this, I got to read all of your stuff, and you just touched on something that really struck me when I read it, which was the question about powers and principalities, and their vulnerability, and how we can picture them particularly in order to give us hope and conviction and capacity for that resistance.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are times when I can feel like something gets in my way. There's some kind of barrier. There's some kind of crazy resistance that happens right when I'm about to do the right thing. Do you know what I mean? Right when I'm about to make the correct turn, do the righteous thing. And I see that. I mean, I'm a little bit Pentecostally with this stuff, that I do see that as a powers and principalities thing. And to go, look, there's a reason that that evil seems to rear itself in times when the good thing is just about to happen. And it's not because it's so powerful, it's because it's so scared. It's because it knows it already lost. It knows that. And so it's just gonna rage even more. And so sometimes to see it in that way allows me to sort of laugh at it rather than to tremble in front of it.
That feels like a really good place to wrap us up for the evening, right? That and the thing that I so appreciate that you bring is both this fierce reflection on your own journey and your own story and the ways that you disappoint yourself and others and God, and the ways that resurrection continues to happen, right? And your your fierce conviction about the love of God and that it's available to all of us all the time.
Yeah.
And that those pieces together are really powerful. And so I'm really grateful to you for spending some time with us, with our 100 people who are here. And we couldn't, those of you who are here, you won't be able to see it on Facebook quite yet. It'll be on YouTube. So you'll be able to follow up and listen again to all of the wonderful things that Pastor Nadia has to say. A couple more things before we wrap quickly. One is that NadiaBolz-Weber.com is where more information is, including the podcasts, which are also available in a whole bunch of places. So season 1 has started, it will continue. And Nadia, you also have a program, it's called The Corners, but tell us a little bit about what The Corners is so folks who aren't familiar with it can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, The Corners is an online publication, and people who want to support my work have paid memberships to have access to everything. However, everybody gets access to everything if you email us. So it's there's so many things that are on there that are accessible to everyone. And then some people who want to be able to support my work do that as well. But really, we make it available to anyone who wants it. So it's NadiaBolz-Weber.substack.com. It's called The Corners. So if you want more engagement, also just the engagement that people have with each other in that group is absolutely incredible. So everyone's invited to come on in.
Awesome, thank you. And like Nadia, the Cathedral also makes all of this available to folks to come and be part of these conversations. We hope that those of you who are part of faith communities are supporting those faith communities financially. We hope that you're contributing in these times where those resources are needed if you have them. And if you would like to share with the Cathedral, then you can do that at cathedral.org/support. And we hope that you'll continue to come back. Dean Hollerith will be talking to Father James Martin next Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock. So we'll have some more theological conversations. So we are grateful. Can I ask you to close us with a prayer? Can I do that? I didn't prep you for that. So I will dive in.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that to you. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And my confession is that I actually wanted to write a benediction like the ones that you had at the end, and I wasn't brave enough to do it. So I will allow the words to come another time, but let's pray for just a moment. Spirit, thank you for being with us. Jesus, thank you for being with us. God, thank you for always, always, always being with us. Bless us as we go. Give us strength, give us courage, give us fierceness, give us love for one another and for you as we move into the rest of our week. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.